You ever wonder how she could do it and not even flinch? How she could betray the man who stood by her, cared for her, maybe even built his life around her, and still sleep peacefully at night? That question haunts men. And it should, because the truth behind it isn't about the act itself. It's about how the female mind justifies betrayal. Before we go deeper into this uncomfortable truth, take a second to subscribe, because what I'm about to reveal isn't sugar-coated psychology. It's the kind of raw emotional truth most people are too afraid to speak out loud. See, when a woman cheats and doesn't feel guilt, it's rarely about cruelty. It's about emotional disconnection. Long before the cheating happens, she begins to emotionally distance herself slowly, quietly, and with purpose. She stops seeing you as her man and starts viewing you as a chapter that's already closing. Her mind reframes the relationship as something that's already over. Even if you're still living together, talking and sharing moments, by the time she crosses the line, her guilt has already been buried under layers of emotional detachment. And that's the part most men don't understand. You think she's just cold. You think she's heartless. But psychologically, she's rationalized it to protect herself from emotional conflict. Women are emotional creatures, but when they decide to suppress that emotion, they can detach in a way that feels almost surgical. That's how she can look you in the eyes after cheating and act like nothing's wrong. She's not processing it like you would. A man cheats and then lives with guilt because he knows he betrayed loyalty. A woman cheats and often convinces herself it was a reaction, not a decision. Maybe you were distant. Maybe she felt unseen. Maybe she wanted to feel desired again. The moment she attaches meaning to her betrayal, the guilt fades. It becomes a narrative, a justification. That's the cold truth. She doesn't need to feel guilty when her emotions already told her the relationship was dead. And while you were still trying to fix it, she had already moved on emotionally, long before she moved on physically. The real question isn't why didn't she feel guilty. It's when did she stop caring enough to feel anything at all. By the time she cheats, she's not fighting her conscience. She's protecting her emotional story. And that story always begins long before the betrayal. It begins with subtle resentments, small disappointments, and unspoken emotions that she never truly shared. Maybe you thought things were fine. Maybe she smiled, laughed, and said everything was okay. But inside, her emotional connection to you was quietly eroding. And when a woman starts to feel unseen, unheard, or emotionally neglected, she begins to rewrite the story of your relationship in her mind. At first, it's small. She tells herself, he doesn't understand me anymore. Then it becomes, he doesn't even try. Eventually, it becomes, I deserve to feel something again. That final thought is dangerous because that's the one that kills her guilt before it's even born. Once she believes she deserves the connection she's missing, she gives herself permission to seek it elsewhere, not out of hatred, but out of emotional self-preservation. Men often think cheating is about attraction, lust, or opportunity, but for many women, it's about emotional justification. If she feels lonely, she convinces herself she's the victim. If she feels unappreciated, she paints herself as someone simply trying to find happiness. These narratives aren't lies. They're emotional shields. They protect her from shame and guilt by reframing her choices as reactions, not betrayals. That's why when you confront her, she might say things like, you pushed me away, or I was unhappy for a long time. To you, those words sound like excuses. To her, they're reasons. The emotional evidence she uses to keep herself from drowning in guilt. And if she's built those reasons over months or years, her guilt doesn't stand a chance. It gets replaced by a strange calm, a quiet certainty that what she did was meant to happen. You see, guilt requires empathy for the person you've hurt. But by the time she cheats, her empathy for you has been redirected. It's no longer about your pain. It's about her emotional survival. And once she crosses that line, she's not thinking, I betrayed him. She's thinking, I finally did what I had to do. That's how guilt dies. Not in one moment, but over time, replaced by the story she tells herself to stay at peace with what she's done. The hardest truth for men to face is this: she didn't just cheat on you. She outgrew the version of herself that loved you. That's why the guilt doesn't hit her like you expect. Because in her mind, the woman who made that commitment isn't the same woman who broke it. She's evolved into someone new, someone who feels entitled to a different emotional experience. And that transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, quiet unraveling. Maybe you noticed small changes. She stopped asking how your day was. Her laughter sounded forced. Her touch felt colder. Maybe you thought it was stress or routine or life wearing you both down. But deep inside, she was emotionally detaching piece by piece. When women emotionally detach, they don't announce it. They drift. They stop arguing. They stop explaining. And they start imagining what it would feel like to be understood again. That fantasy grows stronger each time she feels ignored, until one day it's not a fantasy anymore. It's a justification. Here's the thing. Guilt thrives on self-awareness, but emotional detachment kills that awareness. When she tells herself, "He stopped caring about me," she gives herself moral permission to stop caring about you. That's when her empathy begins to shift. She might even see herself as the one who's been hurt more, the one who's been emotionally abandoned. And if she believes that long enough, she'll see her actions as balance, not betrayal. This is the cold psychology behind it. Most women don't cheat to hurt you. They cheat to feel alive again. They crave emotional intensity, that rush of being desired, understood, or seen. And when they find someone who gives them that, even for a moment, they interpret it as destiny. That illusion blinds them to the damage they're causing. But when the truth comes out and you ask, "How could you do this?" she'll often freeze. Not because she's guilty, but because she doesn't know how to make you understand the version of the story she's been living in. Her mind is at war between what she did and what she told herself it meant. And that's why her tears, her silence, or even her anger after being caught often have nothing to do with regret. They come from the collapse of her narrative, the sudden realization that the story she built to protect her emotions just shattered in front of you. When you finally confront her, the conversation you expect, the tears, the apologies, the begging for forgiveness often never comes. Instead, she might look distant, calm, maybe even defensive. And in that moment, something inside you breaks because you realize she's not feeling what you're feeling. You're burning with betrayal, but she's standing in emotional ashes that were already cold, long before you knew there was a fire. This isn't because she's heartless. It's because she's emotionally rewired herself to survive the guilt. Before she ever cheated, she spent months silencing her empathy towards you. Every argument, every disappointment, every moment, you didn't understand her feelings. She used it as emotional evidence to detach. So by the time she crossed that line, she had already built psychological distance between who she was with you and who she is now. And when that distance exists, guilt can't breathe. She doesn't wake up every morning feeling shame. She wakes up feeling justified. That's the dangerous side of emotional rationalization. When a woman convinces herself that she was unloved, unappreciated, or emotionally abandoned, her mind reframes betrayal into liberation. She doesn't see it as breaking something sacred. She sees it as freeing herself from something broken. That's why she can look you in the eye after everything and say, "You made me do this." It's not manipulation. It's psychological protection. Admitting guilt would destroy the fragile emotional narrative she's been holding on to. She needs to believe that she was pushed, not that she chose. Because if she admits choice, she must face shame. And shame is the one emotion she's been running from all along. And that's what leaves so many men confused. Because from your perspective, guilt is natural. You'd feel it, you'd carry it, but she doesn't. Not because she's incapable of empathy, but because she redirected that empathy inward. She turned it into self-preservation. And when self-preservation takes over, remorse doesn't stand a chance. So when you ask, Does she even care? The brutal truth is she once did deeply, but she buried that care under the weight of her own emotional pain. She numbed herself to the guilt before it could ever reach her heart, and that's why to you she seems cold. To her she's finally at peace, but peace built on denial never lasts. Sooner or later, that emotional numbness starts to crack. Not because she suddenly feels sorry, but because reality begins to catch up. At first she feels powerful for making her own choice, for reclaiming what she thought was lost. She tells herself she's stronger now, independent, finally free. But deep down, when the newness fades, when the validation disappears, when she lies awake at night in silence, she starts to feel the weight of what she traded. Not the relationship itself, but the version of herself she left behind. You see, guilt doesn't always come immediately. Sometimes it creeps in slowly through loneliness. She might see you moving on, healing, finding your strength again, and that's when it hits her. Because guilt often shows up when a man stops chasing her forgiveness. When you reclaim your self-worth, she can no longer define herself as the victim. And once that illusion dies, the truth of her action starts to echo louder. But that's not your responsibility. Your healing doesn't depend on her guilt. It depends on your understanding. When you finally realize that her betrayal was never about your value as a man, you take back your power. Her lack of guilt doesn't mean you weren't enough. It means she was emotionally lost, searching for something she couldn't even define. And she used betrayal as a way to escape herself. Men often internalize betrayal. They make it about their failure. But listen carefully, you can't control someone else's emotional maturity. You can give love, consistency, and loyalty. But if a woman hasn't faced her own emotional wounds, she will sabotage any relationship that forces her to confront them. That's what cheating really is. Not a rejection of you, but an avoidance of her own emotional truth. So stop trying to understand her guilt. Stop waiting for her to admit what she did wrong. Because the moment you do that, you give her control over your peace. Instead, learn from the pattern, not the pain. See her actions for what they are, a reflection of her inner conflict, not your worth. The real power lies in knowing that her lack of guilt doesn't erase your value. It only exposes the emotional distance she's been living in and the emptiness that follows her long after the excitement fades. Now comes the hardest part, rebuilding yourself after realizing she never felt guilty. Because that realization cuts deeper than the betrayal itself. It makes you question everything. Was any of it real? Did she ever love you? Was she pretending the whole time? And the truth is, yes, she did love you once. But emotional immaturity doesn't know how to protect what it loves. It only knows how to escape what it can't understand. She didn't plan to hurt you. She just didn't know how to face the emptiness inside her without destroying something pure. And you became the collateral damage of her confusion. But you can't stay stuck in the cycle of analyzing her mindset. You can't keep replaying the conversations, the signs, the moments that suddenly make sense. Because every second you spend trying to make sense of her betrayal is a second stolen from your healing. You deserve more than being haunted by why. You deserve to rebuild the man she underestimated, the man who can rise from this, sharper, calmer, and wiser. Understand this. Her lack of guilt isn't power. It's paralysis. It's emotional avoidance dressed as strength. One day she'll face herself when the distractions stop working, when no one else is there to mirror her worth. And in that silence, guilt will finally find her. But by then you won't need her to feel it. You'll have already moved on. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. What she couldn't do. Take accountability. Face the truth. Own the damage. You can. That's what separates emotionally strong men from broken ones. You use the pain as a teacher, not a curse. You learn how to spot emotional detachment before it fears. You stop chasing closure from people who are allergic to responsibility. You turn betrayal into awareness. So if you're listening right now and you still feel that ache in your chest, remember this. Her silence isn't peace, it's avoidance. Her calm isn't healing, it's denial. But your pain, that's transformation. That's the fire that forges the kind of man no betrayal can destroy again. If this message hit home, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video because men deserve the truth, not comforting lies. And sometimes the coldest truth is the one that finally sets you